Hi, I'm Kim Clark, and thanks for joining me today. Today I have a very special guest, a very dear friend of mine, Zicky Chanda. Zicky is the principal and director of Lighthouse Christian School in Ndola, Zambia, and she's also a dear friend of mine. So without further ado, let me introduce Zicky Chanda. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm glad I could be here.
Oh, me too. Me too. We've known each other for 12 years now.
Yes.
And God has just been amazing, just weaving us together, and especially our work together in missions. You as the principal and director of Lighthouse Christian School, and actually you've read the book Deep Waters, Lift Your Gaze, and I'd like to find a little bit how you would kind of use this book for the women you interact with, the single mothers in Zambia. And before maybe we talk, maybe kind of address the differences, because you lived in the United States for 4 years, the differences between widows in the United States, single parent widows in the United States as opposed to in Ndola, Zambia.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's a joy for me just to sit here and talk about Deep Waters, Lift Your Gaze. Of course, it's one of the books that we've been looking forward to, and finally it's here. So to God be the glory.
Amen.
Just reading this book, and I've already been blessed just by reading the book.
Thank you.
And the question that you asked me about the women that I'm working with, the children that we are serving, relating to this topic and this theme of Deep Waters, Lift Your Gaze, you've rightly put it. Most of the children are orphaned and they're vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And so most of the mothers that they have are widows. And so reading this book, I see hope. I see hope in the book, and my prayer would be if only they could read this book that can bring hope to them. So to differentiate the widows in America and the widows that I'm working with, especially after having stayed in the U.S., there's a lot of things in the U.S. You have a lot in terms of resources, food, and everything. And so one of the challenges the women that I'm interacting with through the sponsorship program we have through these orphan and vulnerable children is that most of these women, their source of income is very little. And so they wouldn't have enough money to send the child to school. Of course, we have some government schools that they can send the children to, but they're not very good government schools. And so this is how Lighthouse Christian School came about, this vision of us just giving quality education to these orphaned and vulnerable children. And so the difference would be, like I mentioned earlier on, there's so much in America. Probably a widow in America will still be able to have enough on the table. And even through the government, I've seen this in America, there are so many ways the government helps out the poor. But back home in Zambia, it's maybe a very different story. Of course, we have other widows who probably would be in a different class. They would have enough. But speaking for the children and the mothers that I interact with through Lighthouse Christian School, most of them wouldn't have enough. And so Deep Waters, Lift Your Gaze would bring hope to them.
Thank you for that encouragement. And I do agree. The waters in Zambia are deeper than those in the United States. Not that those in the United States aren't suffering. We don't have trials. We don't have difficulties. But they're very deep. And one of the ways I think it makes it deeper is a lot of the women you're interacting with are literate. So you're almost taking this in, regurgitating it to not only as a pastor's wife, but also to a director of the school, and kind of employing your teachers to equip those parents they interact with. Yes, this is difficult. I'm empathizing with you, but also there's hope.
Yes.
And so talk a little bit how you would kind of foresee working with that aspect of the book.
You've rightly put it, even through the teachers. I mean, if anything, one of my vision is to have a literacy program for these women. And my prayer is that one day they'll be able to read this book on their own. But if they can't read, my desire is to have copies of this book and putting it in the hands of the teachers, because we do interact with these women quite often. Sometimes they would pass through the school, or sometimes we have open day, consultation day, they come in to check on the progress of the children. It can be an opportunity to share. I've had situations where probably a parent comes in, a mother comes in, or even a grandmother, because most of these children are left with grandmothers. We've had few who are left with siblings. I've had situations where maybe a grandmother comes in my office and they have no hope, thinking nothing. Now they've lost this breadwinner. What's next? Who's going to be paying for their school fees? So I've had these situations, and what an opportunity it would be for me, who's read Deep Waters, to share such an experience with them and to encourage them not to lose hope, but to trust in Jesus, who's able to take care of their daily needs. So that's one of the ways I believe can help the women back home in Zambia. And probably, just to digress a bit, I also serve with the women at our church.
Absolutely.
Who are able to read this book.
Absolutely.
And what a joy it will be for them to have an access to such a book and with such a theme of raising their hope. And I mean, there's so many ways we suffer. There's so many ways women, and let me talk about the women,
Amen.
How we suffer this physical abuse, I mean, mental abuse, all this, and even especially the loss of a beloved one, and where a woman remains probably the only one that is taking care of the children. So even from church, the aspect of church, I would really desire that the women would have access to such a book.
Oh, that's so encouraging. Thank you. Because this book can be used individually,
Yes,
personally, and also in
yes.
the Bible study context
Exactly.
as well. So you can have there's application questions and prayer journals. So I can just see that.
Yes,
Just really as the author and perfecter of our faith,
Exactly.
Jesus just helps us to lift our gaze to the deep waters. And
Yeah.
so actually a portion of Deep Waters Lift Your Gaze goes to ministries like Lighthouse Christian
Amen,
School.
amen.
And your husband has a pastor's college, Copper Belt Pastor's College in Ndola, Zambia, so I would go to that as well. So this is just such a blessing
Amen.
for me just to see how God uses this. And it would be neat if we get a sponsor to just bless all
Yes.
the women in the church and also your educators with this book. They could do this as a Bible study, because I think this would be so encouraging. It's been 3 years in the making, and God has just
Amen.
used it abundantly and exceedingly beyond my wildest dreams, just to help me and others that have read it just to lift their gaze. And so also I didn't want to leave without mentioning this, that through Covenant Mercies people can sponsor orphans, fatherless orphans, and pay for school fees.
Yeah. Yes. We've partnered with Covenant Mercies, so if anyone wants to help out in this ministry, they're very free to go to covenantmercies.org and just check it out and just see what Covenant Mercies is doing. Right now, they are helping over 400 children in Zambia, because like I mentioned earlier on, we have our Lighthouse starts from baby class, that's kindergarten, to 7th grade, and then they go on to high school, and eventually they go to college. So it's one of the sponsorship programs that we've seen that has really helped these children. I mean, they never knew some of these children, if they didn't get this sponsorship, they would have ended up on the street, or maybe something else would have happened to them. But the fact that Covenant Mercies came along and we're serving together with them, with these children, helping to lift their gaze,
Amen.
to lift them from these deep waters that
Amen.
after losing a parent, probably they thought that was the end of them. But we're so grateful that the Lord was able to help us partner with Covenant Mercies. So we're so grateful. And through Covenant Mercies, like you mentioned, we met
That's
12
it.
years along the road.
Exactly.
The Lord has just blessed us with this strong friendship. So
Amen.
we're so grateful that in the end now we'll be able to even read this book and be blessed by such a book through your hard work. So we're so
Zicky,
grateful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So thank you for joining us today. As I said earlier, my name's Kim Clark, and I've written Deep Waters Lift Your Gaze. You can go to www.kimmclark.com to get a copy. It'll soon be available on Amazon. So, and this can be used individually or in a group setting as a Bible study or just as a book study. So again, thank you for joining us. It's Kim Clark and Zicky Chanda.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
God bless.